of emergency management. Okay, and the first model for emergency management is emergency services model, right? So the emergency services model. The emergency services model, the quote is, quote, primarily concerned with the coordination of emergency services, right? Primarily focused with the coordination of emergency CY, right? Primarily concerned with the coordination of emergency services. And this is the interaction between emergency service providers only, and that's a very important point, right? This is the interaction at the time of an attack, if you will, if there is an attack. The interaction is between emergency service providers, right? So EMS and their interaction with hazmat team, or EMS and their interaction with doctors and nurses, and so on. Hazmat and hazmat's interaction with local hospitals, emergency service providers. So the interaction is primarily between emergency service providers. There's a problem, however, obviously. And again, this is one extreme. Obviously, there are many degrees of gray in between both of these extremes. But obviously the problem, and this comes from page 15 of Alperin, the problem is, quote, this has the effect of isolating them, the emergency service providers, this has the effect of isolating them further from policy-making functions of the jurisdiction, right? Obviously, emergency service is going to take place within and is regulated by, quote, the policy-making function of the jurisdiction, right? So there's state municipalities, their city municipalities, federal structures are going to, in a sense, limit or condone, allow, govern, regulate the mechanisms and the manner in which they provide their services, right? All of these things are obviously regulated. There's certain things that you can do, there's certain things that you can't do, and that, if you will, that bureaucracy, that regulation comes from primarily city, state, federal municipalities, right? The problem is, this has the effect of isolating emergency service providers from the policy-making function of the jurisdiction. So what needs to be done then is that there needs to be, and this is what's very, very important, there needs to be their input, because this is man on the ground, right? Emergency service providers have specific training, and they know what's the best way to go about, I don't know, decontaminating an area, for example. Their input needs to be not just within intra-service, right? Not just within the community of emergency service providers, right? So if we look at emergency service providers, right? We need to have a relationship between emergency service providers and also the gov, right? There needs to be a relationship in which there's a discourse between, I wish I would stop calling Dr. Campbell. Dr. Campbell? Yeah. I can't talk right now. I'm in the middle of a lecture, so call me back tomorrow, or you know, just call me back tomorrow. Send me an email. Okay, bye. All right. So the problem that we have here is the relationship between the emergency service provider and the government. Right. We need to make sure that there is constant dialogue, constant discourse between emergency service providers and the federal government and all of the subsidiary bodies in between the man on the ground and the federal government, right? This is inherently the biggest, I wouldn't say problem, but it's the main focus, is creating a structure, and as we continue, I'll talk about the structure that actually exists in theoretical conceptions to sort of bolster the structure that I'll provide. All right, the second is the public administration model. So the public administration, ADMINIST, administration model. Public administration model. First, emergency management is an element of the overall administration of the government, right? Emergency management from this public administration model, right? Managing emergencies is an overall function of the government. So I'll read that again. Emergency management is an element of the overall administration of the government, right? Handling emergencies is part of the government, right? And the responsibility is not only the responsibility of local municipalities, it's also a federal responsibility. The second point with respect to public administration is that interaction between the emergency service providers and a broader network of emergency management needs to be structured, right? There needs to be a sense in which we have a relationship between the federal government, right? The federal government on the top, and the particular emergency service provider on the street, right? And obviously the emergency service provider at the time of casualty, at the time of attack, we're going to be in that sort of recovery phase, right? The whole point of the federal government at the time of attack, right? Obviously we weren't able to prevent, we weren't able to de-escalate or reduce. And now we've been attacked. We're in this like last phase. We've been attacked. What we want to do is we want to make sure we being federal government, right, or theorist, really, me as a theorist, we want to make sure that the federal government has strategies in place to make sure that emergency service providers are acting in accordance with, go back to the first page, the strategic approach, right? Minimizing the potential casualty, minimizing damage, right? So there needs to be a discourse between the federal government and the particular emergency service provider, and then obviously there's a system. There's a very, very elaborate system between the federal government and the particular emergency service provider. And what I'm going to do in the next section of this analysis is I'm going to talk obviously about intelligence. A lot of this, a vast majority of this lecture is going to be situated within a discourse of intelligence. And as I said, right, this isn't anything that you can't find on the internet. All the information that I compiled, I got from .gov pages. Granted, you need to be able to know where to look in the .gov pages, and this is where this book is just completely invaluable, because what Alperin's been able to do is he's been able to look at the law and the various mechanisms. He's a lawyer. Look at the various mechanisms of the law and how they relate to Homeland security, national security, and then you can use that as a guide, right? You can use that as a guide to structure your analysis, which is exactly what I've done. The point being, we can't make sense of this relationship without recognizing this arrow, the significance of this arrow, and the arrow represents intel. It's intelligence, right? We need to know what you know, and we need to disseminate that information and analyze that information in order to better assess, in order to more effectively assess the nature of the threat, the efficiency in which our resources are allocated and our people are allocated, and so on and so on and so on, right? So a lot of the discussion, as you'll see, will be my attempt to analyze intelligence gathering mechanisms and information, and that's what I'll be doing in the next section. With that, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This concludes the first section of, and I'll label it better next time, National Security and Homeland Security. And I will continue this in the next section. Thank you. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Goodbye.